I love that. I want
I
that.
love that.
Yeah, I
Yes.
thought you would.
Oh my God. This is the way, my friends. This is the way. These are the companies that are going to be the most successful. They're going to create the most value. This is the definition of disruption, my friends. The definition of disruption.
You're listening to the Startup Podcast. This is a Reacts episode.
Hey, I'm Chris Saad.
Hi, I'm Yaniv Bernstein.
Hi, I'm Amir Shevat.
And on today's show, we're going to talk about Donald Trump. Like always, we're going to talk about him doing a tour of the Middle East and getting massive investment deals in US tech. Is it just for show, or is it a real boon to the tech industry? We'll tell you all about it. Spoiler alert, it's Donald Trump being a moron again. We're also going to talk about Apple testifying in front of the DOJ and revealing some of Google's dirty little secrets. We're going to tell you what they said, why they said it, and what the implications are for Google, for Apple, and the search market in general. And then we're also going to talk about YC, Y Combinator, the best startup accelerator in the history of the world. They've put out a call for startups, and they've listed a bunch of startups that they want to see for their next batch. So we're going to tell you what these startups are, how you should think about pitching for them, and how you should think about protecting yourself from disruption if you pursue one of these startups, and a whole lot more on this week's show right after the break. Stay tuned.
Whether you're starting or scaling your company's security program, demonstrating top-notch security practices and establishing trust is more important than ever. Vanta automates compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, and more, saving you time and money while helping you build customer trust. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. And it gets even better. Just for TSP listeners, you can get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/TSP. That's VANTA.com/TSP for the Startup Podcast to get $1,000 off. So the first thing we wanted to talk about is the wave of mega deals around AI coming out of Saudi Arabia because of Donald Trump's tour. So Donald Trump's doing a little tour of the Middle East, his first overseas trip since becoming president, which is notable in itself. And while he was there, a whole bunch of mega deals were announced. So for example, Saudi Arabia's sovereign-backed company Humane is snapping up NVIDIA's Blackwell chips, which are the cutting-edge ones that can't be sold to China. UAE's G42 is doing AI development partnerships with Cisco, and a Saudi firm called DataVault is investing $20 billion in US infrastructure. Google, Oracle, Uber pledging $80 billion in joint initiatives. So this is one of these things that has been maybe a little bit of a pattern with Donald Trump, as he loves to go to places and he likes to get these big announcements made about investment that makes him look good. But Amira, what are your thoughts on this?
I have mixed feelings. From one end, like investing in our industry is always probably good. The majority of me is wary. I'm wary because I don't like government investment. I think it comes with ties. I don't like that all these deals were facilitated by Trump. So I'm sure there's a few deals behind the scene that we're not hearing about, that when the time comes, Trump will try to cash his chips. And I don't like the fact that a non-democratic country is investing in tech in the US. So all of this is giving me bad vibes. So I'm okay doing deals with any peaceful country. And Saudi Arabia is a great country. I'm just saying, I don't like government investments, and I don't like that it's orchestrated by Trump in general.
I've got a lot of thoughts on this. Number one, these announcements are generally hollow and full of shit. Saudi and various sovereign funds, NVIDIA and others, they're all making these deals and making these investments anyway. They just seem to time them and coordinate them for a press release with Trump so that they can make a big story out of it. But here's the problem. He loves making these explicit deals. He loves these deals being announced under his name and in his name. But what he doesn't seem to understand is that the US is constantly and continuously getting the benefit of all the best deals in the world because of the United States halo. The halo is priceless, right? The brand, the political stability, the rules-based system, the risk tolerance capital ecosystem, the smart people powered by immigration. These deals happen all day, every day, all the time. But he's out there pretending like he's the one making them happen What he's actually doing is the one that is dampening the deals. The net is that Europe, Asia, the Middle East are all being forced to think twice about the US as a place to invest and as a place to headquarter a company and so on and so forth. And so I think for every deal he announces, which is probably a deal that was going to happen anyway, I would be unsurprised if there are some large magnitude of deals that have been delayed, distracted, diminished, or completely deflected thanks to his shenanigans.
For sure. And I would say that for every deal that he does, I'm sure there's another deal that is connected to weapons and guns and defense. So now we're tying our tech industry with our defense industry. So what you're saying is true, but it's also like he's using that as a lever, all that deals that he's announcing to get better defense deals, to get better oil deals. So I think he's muddying the water of the business in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point, Amir, and it actually sort of goes through to one of the things I was going to talk about, which is I think that the geopolitics of this, and you're right to mention defense spending. So Saudi Arabia is actually a long-standing ally of the US. And if you look at the sort of realpolitik of global geopolitics, I think that makes sense, right? Saudi Arabia is wealthy, it's got quite a lot of power, and it's either going to align itself with the US, or if not, it'll probably align itself with China. And so the US probably thinks better to keep Saudi Arabia close. And yeah, to your point about military and defense spending, Saudi Arabia buys a huge amount of weaponry from the US, and the US is happy to sell it to them. And the truth about AI is it's now being viewed effectively as a military asset or as a national security asset, put it that way, right? Where the same type of logic and thinking around the trade in AI chipsets especially is the type of thinking that goes around the sale of military technology. And so you say, well, we'll sell our AI chips to Saudi Arabia because they're an ally, and we won't sell them to China because they're an adversary. And it's not to do with democratic values or anything like that. It's sort of pure geopolitics. And in that sense, I think it's fairly logical. And then, you get to the two things that are about Donald Trump and his personality, which I think are, just obnoxious, but perhaps less important in this particular context. Yeah. One being the ring kissing, the grandstanding, the showboating, right? This idea that everything has to be about him personally, not about the United States, but about Donald Trump, building that personality cult. And then I think there is his natural affinity for authoritarian countries or authoritarian leaders like Mohammed bin Salman, because you say, a democracy like the US maybe shouldn't be getting so close to undemocratic countries, but Donald Trump has a long history of admiring that form of government. And I'd say that the darker interpretation of what's happened in the last 100 and a few days since he took office is he is trying to model his leadership and trying to model US government on this more authoritarian way of doing leadership. So there is this natural affinity. I don't think it's a coincidence that the Gulf states are Trump's first overseas visit.
Yeah, so I've a few thoughts on this as well. So number one, a lot of MAGA people are very proud of the fact that he's a businessman. He's going to finally run the country like a business. The thing is, a business is a special interest that needs to do deals. It needs to beg for deals and facilitate deals. He's sort of running the country like a business in that sense. He's also sort of running the country like a mob boss, where he's looking for grand gestures and grifts, and making exceptions for the people he knows and likes. But what the country is supposed to be run like, especially the US, is as an environment, an ecosystem inside which where it's possible to make deals without the government facilitating the deal. It's about creating a rules-based system, a rules-based ecosystem, a rules-based environment in which deals happen without the government's involvement. That's the way it's supposed to work. So he doesn't seem to understand how governments work. That's number one. Number two, one of the best things I heard in recent weeks or months, and I'm going to fail to remember who the attribution is that Trump's trying to make America great again. And what he doesn't understand is that's a downgrade. America was exceptional, and he's just trying to make it great. America was the exception in the world. When there was risk in the world, people would fly to America. When there was risk in the stock market, they would fly to American bonds. When America decided to go bomb a country, people would rally behind it and get behind the narrative. America wasn't great. It was exceptional. It could do whatever it wanted. But now people are flying away from American bonds. They're flying away from the United States. it's behaving, these markets are behaving like third world country markets. So yeah, he's making America great again, which is a downgrade. And then finally, I'll say, you mentioned this, we shouldn't be making, well, actually, you both mentioned we shouldn't be making deals with not democratic countries. I actually disagree with you on that. I think we should be making, two countries with a McDonald's in them never went to war or some shit. I don't think that was proven wrong, maybe, but creating more economic ties between countries and teaching them how to play by democratic or rather capitalistic rules, I think is better for global stability. And we've been close to undemocratic countries from the beginning. We being the West, we've toppled democratic leaders since the beginning, and we are friends with countries that pretend to be democratic and actually quite fascist. So I think we need to make friends with everybody and try to bring the world into more interdependence, not less.
I think it's okay, but the problem and I think we all should be friends, everyone, but I think government facilitating deals is wrong. And I think it ties to what you're saying about being great and being exceptional. Like in every other country, the government helps businesses close deals. In China, for example, every company is owned by the government to 51%. The U.S. is exceptional because the industry, our industry, the tech industry, does not need the government. It needs the government to step aside and make us do the deals. So having like the government facilitate the deals, that's what angsts me. That's what I'm pissed about, because we don't need the government to be great and to be exceptional.
All right, so I wanted to change pace now, and we wanted to get to our next story, which is about the state of the search market. And it actually starts not with Google, but with Apple. We discussed last week the fact that Apple is currently being dragged through a bunch of antitrust testimony. And Eddie Q, who is one of their senior vice presidents, was talking about search traffic through Safari. Now, Google has had this long-running deal with Apple, which is part of its own antitrust suit, so it's antitrust everywhere, where Google pays Apple an exceptional amount of money, believed to be about $20 billion a year, to maintain Google as the default search engine on Apple. So this is incredibly valuable to Google, but it also, of course, gives Apple enormous insight into how Google is being used. And in this person's testimony, Eddie Q from Apple, he revealed that Safari search traffic declined in April 2025 for the first time in 22 years, which is, I guess, ever, right? So that is, I guess the interpretation here that the market came to and that a lot of people came to, and we can discuss, guys, is that AI is starting to finally take chunks out of Google's market share. Following those remarks, Alphabet stock, so Alphabet is the parent company of Google, went down over 9%, which is taking away $155 billion in market cap. And so I think people have been wondering for a while, when will AI start to eat into Google's search dominance? And this very credible data point from Apple, which usually doesn't share any information, is really powerful. Now, Google denies this. They say that overall search volumes on Apple continue to grow. So it's devolved into he said, she said. But Google does maintain that their search volumes remain really strong. So, yeah, I think the question is, are search engines cooked? Like, is this the beginning of a long, slow slide away from search and towards AI?
I think search itself, the actual act of searching, is cooked. I don't think Google is cooked in that way, because I think Google will still be a place where you go and you make the search, but the search won't look the same way. It would look like a digestive thing that AI gave you and then maybe a bunch of links. So I think we are moving into a place where I'm not looking for a set of links or references. I'm looking for the answer. And I think as time passes, user behavior will move from I want to search to I want the answer for something. And I think that's a good move, because that's the intent. When people go and search for answers in Google, they want an answer. They don't want to search for something. They don't want an index. So I think we'll move to a place where the answer will be digested for you. Will that impact Google? Probably, but I think they'll do the right thing and put the digest and the AI front and center in the search. I still think that they have a very strong brand, and that whenever I want an answer for something, I usually go to Google. I'm starting to see that some of my behavior is changing. So, like for complex things, I do go to a ChatGPT or to Claude. So, some of my searches are moving, but I think that we are a very small percentage of the population that is very, very tuned to new tech and new AI. So, we're far from burying Google in my view.
I agree with you that the nature of search is radically changing. I just think also that the search box, the Google search box, is going to be massively disintermediated, and it needs to move local. So Apple is going to do its own form of AI responses on Siri once they can figure out how to find their ass with two hands and a flashlight. But you're going to talk to Siri on iPhone, Siri on Apple glasses, Siri on AirPods, and you're not going to get Google's search page. You're going to get Siri's search results, which may be behind the scenes powered by some Google index, but monetizing that is going to be a hell of a problem for Google. And then Meta, you're going to talk to Meta's apps, you're going to talk to Meta glasses, you're going to talk to, OpenAI's new device. Maybe Google can monetize Android, Chrome, Gemini, Google.com, but I think more of these players, including Alexa and Amazon actually, are going to have to move search local.
What do you mean by local, Chris?
Onto the local device. So right now you're just you're sending queries off to google.com. So in Safari, if you go do a search, you end up on google.com. I think the future is you're going to end up on a Siri interface and a Siri search result. It's going to mediate the search result, even if maybe it's powered by Google behind the scenes. And I really think Apple needs to start thinking about having their own frontier model as well. So I just think that the search market starts to get cannibalized for Google a little more. But I also don't think Google is necessarily going anywhere. As we've talked about many times, they have a lot of natural advantages with Chrome and Android and Google, Google Home and all this sort of stuff. And assuming the DOJ doesn't break them up, they'll keep making money, but they're gonna really struggle to own that distribution the way they've done before.
Yeah. I mean, look, I have a couple of thoughts on this, I guess maybe more on the commercial side, right? Because there's a couple of interesting things here. One is that the types of questions that I believe are being cannibalized by AI, watching my own use, hearing you talk, Amir, are what are called more informational queries. Now, the truth about Google, definitely when I was there, I think this is still true, is that most searches by volume are not monetized. If you do a search for how much does a dolphin weigh, you won't see any ads, right? These are queries without commercial intent, and these are the ones that are probably going the fastest, right? Google makes all its money from queries that have some sort of commercial intent, right? Like I want to buy a TV, I want to book a vacation, I'm trying to figure out the best SaaS for my business. Then you get lots of ads, and those ads are where all the money gets made. And so you could interestingly see a situation where the cash cow is the thing that's preserved, and some of Google's costs actually go down because they don't have to serve all of these queries that are purely informational. Now, long term, I think that still causes damage to the brand and distribution and also to just the giant data absorbing machine that is Google, right? So fewer queries on Google means less data for them to train on. But I wouldn't be surprised if you saw the ad business holding up very well, even if search volumes start to retreat. And that leads me to my second point, which is, and again, if we just to touch on that DOJ trial of Google, is Google's actually got two monopolies, right? It's got a monopoly on search, but it's also got a monopoly on search ads. And these are actually two different things. And a core part of the Department of Justice's claim is that having these two monopolies and tying the ads business and the search business so closely together basically freezes everyone else out. So, and of course, it's the ads business that makes the money. And so I think there's a really interesting future where even if Google loses some of that front door to search, to your point, Chris, they have such a huge advantage in terms of being able to monetize any sort of intent, right? Whether it comes through traditional web search or whether it comes through talking to an AI, that I can't see them losing their dominance in that type of advertising anytime soon. So 9% drop in the stock price looks to me like a buying opportunity. That's not investment advice, by the way.
I think that's interesting if you decouple the search business, the search ads business from search and sort of sell, search ads as a service, AI ads as a service. That'd be interesting.
I've seen a few startups trying to do that. I think that's a horrible idea. I don't want to have ads when I talk to ChatGPT. That sounds That sounds like a horrible, horrible idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some way for companies that are, that are hungry enough to inorganically insert themselves into intent surfaces. There's got to be some way to do that. How do you do it in a way that feels natural, that feels appropriate, feels personal? It's unclear to me exactly how you do that. But again, if you're talking to your personal assistant, and I believe that's the primary interface by which most people are going to talk, they're not going to have 1,000 bots and agents talk. It's just not going to happen. I think you have my personal assistant. You go, hey, I'm really thinking about buying a TV. You know everything you need to know about me. Help me, recommend the top 2 or 3 TVs. Siri is just going to give you that answer. What you call a search query or a query with commercial intent, Yaniv. Google's not even going to get a chance to touch that thing if Siri and Apple are doing their job. Same with Meta, same with OpenAI's device, which is inevitable. And if you're doing it on Android, they'll monetize it. If you're doing it on Chrome, they'll monetize it. But these other guys need to get in the game. And when a new platform, emerges, the deck gets reshuffled, and a lot of Google's natural advantages start to look like net neutrals.
Although I think you've missed my point a little bit, Chris, which is that when you say Google won't get close to those commercial discussions, they won't unless the front end lets them in. And the front end will have a strong incentive to let them in because Google has by far the best capability to monetize, right? They have, the ad business also has a network effect. Everybody's on AdWords, right? Google has the best engine for monetizing that sort of intent in the same way that Meta has the best engine for monetizing.
But I'm not missing your point. What I'm saying is they have the best engine for monetizing keyword search or intent as expressed as keyword search. They don't have the best engine for monetizing personal chat conversations with your personal bot intent, which is complex queries with complex whatever. I think it's a different problem, and it's an opportunity for each of these companies or some combination of these companies to solve it in a different way.
Potentially. But like I said, it's also a network effects business, and the fact that everyone's already on Google is a massive advantage that is difficult to shift. But I think I actually want to go back, Amir, to your point, because I think it's an interesting one. You said ads would be horrible. You don't want ads in there. And of course you don't. I don't want ads in my Google search results either. And, there was this view of a different internet once where you said, well, instead of ads, you have a subscription model. And you're saying that just made me realize, you know what? I pay $20 a month for ChatGPT Plus. I pay $30 a month for Gemini Pro. And, I'm not the average user, but the interesting thing that has happened with AI is that they've moved to a paid subscription model very quickly, whereas search engines were never able to do that. Never. And, so the question is, can they keep that up? Will we have subscription AI? And will that be the main way of using it? I think is a really interesting question.
I think you nailed it. The business model completely shifts to paid. And we don't want ads in our AI. We want the unvarnished real truth. The other factor here is, though, sufficiently well-targeted ads that fulfill your intent are indistinguishable from organic results. And so some combination of high quality, sufficiently high quality intent fulfillment, whether organic or inorganic, serves the user intent. But yes, I think people are wanting to pay for this and want it to be. I pay $200 a month for OpenAI, and I'm happy to do it.
So I think ads are the worst mistake we've done in tech. I just want to put it out there. And I worked for Google for 5 years, so I probably am partly responsible or beneficiary of that horrible mistake. I think it's all about fiduciary duty. If you're dealing with software and it's selling you ads, it's not on your side. It's on the advertiser's side, and you are the product. And I think I would like the fiduciary duty of my software to be with me. And as time passes, the free software in my life sucks. And as time passes, the paid software in my life is delightful. So I want to pay for my software, and I want the software's fiduciary duty to be in my side. That's why I think ads are never going to be the right medium for AI, for paid AI.
Yeah. So I think, it sort of maybe points a roadmap for what's going to happen, which is we're going to have a two-tier system, a bit of a class system here. Because if you look at Netflix, right, has been subscription from the beginning. One of their big claims, against cable is, hey, we don't have commercials, right? We don't have advertising. And then eventually, I think maybe it was 18 months, 2 years ago, they caved and they introduced an ad-supported tier where you still pay, but it's subsidized by ads. And that's done very well, apparently. Now, of course, people who have a bit more means, who have a bit more money, will pay for the non-advertising tiers, but then people who can't afford it or don't want to pay for that money, for that subscription, they go ad-supported. And so, I think at some point, OpenAI, all of these, they have a free tier. I can imagine ads creeping in there. But because the most valuable consumers in the world will be on the paid ad-free tier, it will never be as big a business as the current search ads business.
This discussion reminds me of a Black Mirror episode in the latest season where this lady has a tragic accident and they're forced to replace part of her brain with a chip that connects her to a cloud computing engine so that that part of her brain can continue to function. It has limited range and it has limited, she can't leave her town and whatever. And then eventually this company starts to get more successful and they roll out nationally and internationally and you can roam and stuff. But if you don't upgrade, you start getting ads. And so randomly she goes into this fugue state and starts mindlessly doing ad reads in the middle of her life. So they might be talking about needing to buy some new coffee because they're running out in the kitchen. And she'll just suddenly freeze and start doing an ad read for coffee. And that's what you don't want your LLM to do that, right? You don't want to be talking to your personal assistant, this intimate, personal relationship with this, with an intelligence personified, right? Think of Samantha from Her, and you're having a conversation, and then Samantha all of a sudden goes, "Oh, Chris, I'd love to help you with that, but first, let's talk about Acme coffee." It's shut up. No way.
Yeah, but if you can afford it, this is my point. Not everyone will be able to afford it. And for those who can't afford it, there will be ads. It has ever been thus. I don't think it's a good thing, by the way.
I think that's why software sucks.
Just one last thought on that, though. It's not a good thing for those who can afford it and who want their experience untarnished by, paid interjection. If you're a small business owner, you're a startup, you're whatever, you need an inorganic way to reach customers with high intent. And so there have been billions and trillions of dollars generated from Google ads, App Store ads, Amazon ads, and Meta ads that have powered the app economy, the tech economy. Without it, there was no way for these startups to inorganically acquire users. So I think, we have to be careful that you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I kind of do. I kind of do. I
I
want to say, hey, listen, if you can't pay for reach, do things that help you pay for reach. Do AI optimization. Create more content. Create more value. Do social things. You can use that money that you would pay for ads to do other things that make you relevant in the market. I actually think that paid ads is a cop-out. I think it's a cop-out of instead of having actual value that people talk about you and having virality and having all this, I think there's a layer where I'm wrong, where it's the barber can't create enough value to get local people. But for a lot of the businesses, they just pour Silicon Valley money instead of actually creating tangible value.
I think it's interesting, Chris. You're looking from the point of view of businesses that want to grab people's attention, hijack people's attention. They have a very real need for that. But as a consumer, that's not my problem. Ideally, I do not want my attention to be hijacked. And so, yes, as the world changes, businesses need to find new ways to get people's attention. And look, I don't think advertising is going anywhere, but it is not my problem as a consumer if it's harder for a company to pay money to get into my neurons despite not meriting that attention, right? That is a privilege that I don't grant them by paying my subscription fee, right?
There is a really important dynamic here. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've been looking for some luggage. I've been looking for some, I've become obsessed with everyday carry gear, two-way radios, USB cables, lighting gear, office furniture, countless things where I'm Googling around looking for some stuff. I don't really find exactly what I want. I go away. And then my Instagram feed or my Facebook feed or whatever starts to be populated with content around these things, sometimes miraculously and mysteriously and creepily. And the number of things that I've purchased from these ads is scary high, right? And it's not because these ads are somehow like tricking me. The ad targeting engine is so good that it's able to fulfill my intent in a way that is more discreet and implicit than my explicit search. And again, I think the way you bootstrap growth, Amir, the way you value prop test, the way you start to create that snowball of interest, the way that you build a direct-to-consumer brand, Allbirds and Peak Design and Native Union and all these incredible direct-to-consumer brands that were blocked by all the major chains, they would not have existed without the ability to ride the inorganic wave. So yes, I'm talking. We're a podcast for startup founders and operators, right? It has been incredibly valuable for those people to have an ads ecosystem. And you're right, it's not going away, but we need to be a bit careful about throwing out the baby with the bathwater in this way of reaching people with high intent.
This message has been sponsored by Peak Design. Thank you for.
I love Peak Design. It's the best.
I love Peak Design as well.
And I've got my Native Union cables here. Come on, this is great.
I have 2 bags.
I can't believe you're
love
advertising this shit and we're not even getting paid for it.
You should try them. They're really good.
I've replaced all my bags, all my stuff, my wash bag, my tech bag. It's all Peak Design.
Yeah. I mean, look, if we were really for real here, I guess we would make this podcast subscription, which we don't do. So yeah, I think like there is a strong gravitational pull to an ad-supported model when you want to maximize your distribution.
Cut to the Vanta ad.
Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Dovetail, FlowHealth, and Quora all use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Why aren't you? Get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/TSP. That's VANTA.com/TSP for the Startup Podcast to get $1,000 off. $1,000 off. That's pretty good. So the final topic we wanted to discuss today is that Y Combinator, the premier startup accelerator, of course, has released its regular request for startups. That's when the YC partners talk about the sort of startups that they would like to see formed and then applying to YC. They're saying we will preferentially admit startups in these areas into our accelerator because we think this is where the puck is headed. Now, there are 14 of them. I don't think we have time to go through all of them, but I thought we could pick a few. And the first one is full stack AI companies. I think, Chris, this will resonate with you extremely strongly. So this is what it says on the webpage. Suppose you believe that LLMs are now able to automate a lot of legal work. There are 2 things you might want to do with that idea. You could build an AI agent and sell it to law firms. That's what most people do. Or you could start your own law firm, staff it with AI agents, and compete with the existing law firms. That, my friends, is going full stack.
I love that. I want that.
I love that. Yes.
Yeah, I thought you would.
Oh my God. This is the way, my friends. This is the way. Oh my God. Yes. These are the companies that are going to be the most successful. They're going to create the most value. This is the definition of disruption, my friends. The definition of disruption. If you believe that you can materially impact the end user experience, the business model, the cost, the waste, the inefficiency of an industry, stop trying to sell it to the industry or not. I mean, some people can do that, whatever. If that's your dream is to build enterprise software for lawyers, please go do that. If your dream is to make the legal system, the legal process just magically better, you're not going to do that with existing law firms. You're not. You're going to do that by killing the old law firms with Acme Co. new law powered by Silicon Valley tech. And so, yeah, go disrupt. Go forth and disrupt.
100%. And I would say that this is not a new model. So if you look at Lemonade, they've been doing that for a very long while. They took the insurance industry. They took prediction models to look at actuary and risk. And they IPO'd based on that. Instead of selling software to insurance companies, they became a very, very popular insurance company. So if you want to look at like a working model for this, Lemonade is a great company. I ask every startup that I talk to that tells me that they're using AI to make enterprise software in an industry, I told them, why are you selling to that industry and not really disrupting that industry by going native? I think that that's very, very important.
Amir, I've got 2 or 3 artifacts on my website you should share with these founders. It explains the reasons that B2B is not less risky than B2C. and is the way to go for full disruption. And you mentioned Lemonade. What about Uber? What about Netflix? What about all the great unicorn? What about Google? Google tried to go to Yahoo, and Yahoo told them to piss off. And luckily, thank God they did, because they built a full stack disruptor search engine. Every major unicorn you can think of, pretty much, has gone and done this. I'm sure there are exceptions. Whatever, Shopify and a few others. But go sell your own shit. Go disrupt the incumbents. I love that this is the first thing on the YC request for startups list. It's number one on the list.
We will go to number 2, because I also think this is one of the more interesting ones, which is more design founders. So the concept here is that designers actually have a lot of the most important skills it takes to be founders, but perhaps, because they've lacked certain technical skills, that's limited their ability to actually take that leading role as founders. And again, with AI, of course, is sitting underneath everything in this request for startups. There's an opportunity to empower more designers to become really excellent founders. And so the idea here is, yes, what software can you build that will support design founders?
If I were to look at that, I would couple that with other statements, like more GTM founders. I think GTM is becoming go-to-market. The ability to acquire users, the ability to get more people to see your user, the ability to grab attention is very important. So I would say, okay, maybe less just 2 engineers in a garage, but the designer is welcome as well. But also the GTM, also maybe the revenue founder. I think there's a tide that is shifting towards non-technical founders, but I still think that like technical heavy companies will prevail. So my statement here is that not just design, a lot of non-technical founders will be more valuable, but technical founders are going to be super valuable for the foreseeable future.
But here's the thing, Amir. I think design is special because design is close to product and product scales. And I really believe that brilliant design can create real differentiation, and real differentiation is the same as innovation. Big time differentiation is the same as innovation. And so I do think there is a massive opportunity for incredibly beautifully designed products that are both aesthetically beautiful and functionally effective. And I think that the world is just far too utilitarian. And I think there's a huge opportunity there. I agree with you that, yes, other roles can become, founders more easily now as well. But, I'm going to show my bias and my prejudice. I think a lot of GTM or growth or sales leaders don't know how to scale, or certainly sales leaders. And so they don't know how to build products. They don't understand prioritization. They don't understand craft. They don't understand scale. And so if you get a sales guy running a startup with some vibe coding, God, I would be really afraid to see what they build and who they build it for. It would be a complete disaster. Maybe there are some other roles, product managers as founders, and other skills that are closer towards the product and scale end of the spectrum. And I agree with you. More people, more craftspeople all over the shop being founders, but I think design and designers are quite special.
Yeah, look, we did an episode actually not very long ago, Chris, that we called, you should go listen to this one, folks. We call it Next Gen Founders, Startups in the Age of AI, right? And what we talked about is the fact that what AI does is it makes execution cheaper, right? Like execution used to be the long pole. It used to be the thing sitting in the critical path that determined your cycle length. And with AI, that is getting shorter, right? The execution is moving from idea to implementation, becomes faster. And what that means is everything else on either side of the execution, the design and product on one end, go to market on the other hand, are elevated in importance. That is where a lot of the competitive advantage will be. So, I think you guys are arguing like it's either or, but I think, good design coupled with good go-to-market, and also just that ability to, that raw intellectual horsepower of being able to iterate quickly and actually ideate and move meaningfully with what you've learned, which I think, a really good designer, and, we've had Yuki Yamashita on the show, the chief product officer of Figma. Listen to that episode as well. But, we talked about design and what real design is. It's not about making it look pretty. It's about making it work really well. And that requires many iterations, and it requires taste and a really deep understanding of how humans interact with things, in this case with software, And so, yeah, like I do think that real, true designers in that sense, as opposed to visual designers, are going to get a lot of superpowers. And if you can give them certain tools to enable them to flourish in this environment, then yes, I think there's a lot of power in that.
If this is one among the first of the episodes you've heard of our show, guys, go back to the back catalog in the early days where you'll hear Yaniv poo-poo the idea that taste and judgment is a real differentiator.
Oh, fuck off, Chris.
But but what I'm saying is I have scored a victory that I have convinced him all these many hours, all these many years, that taste and judgment plays a critical role in
You can tell yourself that if you like, my friend.
I can tell you that the best founder that I worked with, Stuart Butterfield, was all about design. Like his entire entrepreneurship point of view was make it amazing to an amazing experience. So I kind of agree that designer could be a top essence to drive a company. Yaniv is right. It's not a or, it's an end.
Okay, now there's a bunch of, I guess, requests for startup here that are kind of bundle in the just like, you know, using the latest AI technology to make broken things less broken. So there's one around voice AI, there's an AI personal assistant, healthcare AI residential security, and AI voice assistants for email, AI for personal finance. All of these, like they're different sectors, but we're basically saying, okay, here's something in the world that is really important, that is really valuable, that doesn't work very well right now, and we can use AI to fix it. To me, that's like, yeah, okay, sure. I don't have a huge amount of commentary to add, but I don't know if either of you folks would like to comment on that bundle or that category of startup requests.
One thing I will add is I continue to believe the AI companies, the application layer AI companies that have the most defensibility over the long term are those that physically interact with the real world. So there's a lab doing some lab work. There's a home you're renting out with Airbnb, an asset you're moving in the real world like an Uber. So you have to physically interact with the real world. Or that the software is some kind of massively multiplayer game. Think of a social network or an actual video game or a marketplace. Those are hard for an LLM to dream up at runtime and propagate amongst a small group of people, because the rules need to be set, they need to be common, and they need to interact or they need to interact with physical assets in the real world. And so when I look at this list, some of these don't meet that criteria, but some of them very much do. So these ones that you've listed off, voice AI, personal assistant, residential security, even maybe, these feel like, especially AI voice assistant for email, these feel relatively, in the crosshairs for disruption by just a raw LLM. The personal assistant, I mean, Google's going to do that, Siri's going to do that. Voice assistant for email, Gmail's going to do that. And so you're going to want to hope that these, frontier models don't get really, really good and displace you. Although, just a side note, Gemini is a piece of garbage and can't help me with my email at all right now. But I think some of these are a little bit in the danger zone and don't qualify for what I'm saying, and that's a problematic thing, I think.
I think the way to look at it is to remove the word AI from there and say, does this industry merit disruption in a fundamental way? Look at it from first principles without the AI glitter. Like, do we have the right team? Is this a big enough TAM? Is this a big enough pain? And if it is, solve it with either AI or a for loop. I don't care how you do it. Go and do the job. So I think like all these things are a mixed bag of, okay, these are broken things, but do they have the right TAM? Is the pain big enough? Is the willingness to pay there? So I will do a regex and remove all the AI from all these call to.
Yeah, but Amir, I think the point here is why Combinator is saying, hey, our thesis, like everybody else, is that AI is a massive platform shift. It therefore reshuffles the deck on winners and losers, and it forces you to reevaluate all problems through a new lens and new first principles. And therefore, the reason to exist, the reason for why now, is AI. And so the question is, what inefficiency and waste is left over by the legacy players? And by legacy, I mean one generation ago, SaaS and consumer apps that were pre-AI. And how do you disrupt those, immediately, near-term legacy players using AI as the first principles differentiator.
But here, I agree, but hear me out. They gave two examples. One of them is voice assistants to email, and the other one is AI for health. I think one is a crazy TAM for health. There's a crazy TAM and tons of this. You could dive into it and do AI just for surgeons, and you'd have a crazy TAM. And voice assistant for email, I would ask myself, like, is that a real business? Or to your point, it will be disrupted by Gmail and Microsoft Office because they're incumbent and they'll be stupid if they don't have a PM that's thinking about it right now. So even if you take the AI from that equation, you'd need to look and see at the basic merits. Is this a good enough of a business to innovate in?
Yes. And I think the other point, just that's complementary to what you're saying there, Amir, is don't get so distracted by the shiny AI to forget that you're basically building tools to solve real problems in the real world. That's some of it. And, you see marketing copy that's like this powered by AI and that powered by AI. And to your point, it's like, I don't give a shit what it's powered by. Does it solve my problem or doesn't it solve my problem? And so, yes, AI is an enabling technology, but so you've got to be very much aware of it, but you don't want to be fixated on the tool. You want to be fixated on the problem and then be hyper aware of what new capabilities the tool gives you to solve the problem, but the problem is still at the center.
My peak design does not have AI.
Sorry?
My peak design doesn't have any AI, and it helps me carry things from one place to another. Delightful software.
But wouldn't it be better if it did have AI, Amir?
No, I don't want AI in my peak design.
The advice, of course, is good, and we've given it on this show a million times, which is solve a problem, don't follow the shiny objects. But this YC request for startups is the definition of shiny objects, right? It's saying AI has disrupted everything. We want AI startups, and we want AI for everything. You have to evaluate, is that a real opportunity? Is there real inefficiency and waste? Again, I'm saying there probably is. When you rethink that industry with AI first principles, you will find a way to reduce inefficiency and waste. The question I'm saying is not, is there a real inefficiency or waste that could be solved by AI? The answer is yes. The question is there white space that is not going to quickly collapse by one of the hyperscalers or their winner-takes-all acquisition of one of these startups and you're going to be left for dead. So I think that's the problem I've been pointing out for many months now is the white space is unclear. You need to move fast, get acquired or consolidated, and exit quickly and retire is probably the advice.
Okay, so now there are two requests for startup that are around education, right? So one is called AI Personal Tutor for Everyone, and the other is simply the future of education, which is really more about, teachers and how we can make teachers more educators and take away a lot of that admin burden. Now, education is one of those areas. I thought I'd single that one out because, first of all, AI is so clearly relevant and going to challenge and change a lot of things about teaching and also can be incredibly powerful. But also, I think it faces systemic issues that are as strong or stronger even than healthcare. And so I think it's a bit of a unique space to think about. And I don't know if you guys have thoughts on how education should be changing in the presence of this technological wave.
I think there's a lot of disruption to be made in education. There's also a lot of money. If you ever send your kids to college, you'll see how much money you have to pay to get proper education. I think that needs to change and fundamentally and fast. But I think that a lot of things are stacked against you if you're an entrepreneur in education. It's hard to raise money when you're an entrepreneur in education. Getting your customers is hard. Your customers do not have a lot of money. And you fight for attention. I failed to see a lot of successful entrepreneurs loving and returning back to education startups. They do it once and they say, I don't want to go into that industry again. And I think that's a signal that shows that there's like fundamental problems there that I don't think startups are set up to be successful there. I might be totally wrong, but I looked at a few educational startups. I'm just saying I'm running, empirically speaking, they have hard time acquiring users. They have a hard time monetizing those users, and they have a hard time raising more funds.
In the US, education and healthcare are fully broken. The inequality between the haves and have-nots the cost to get high quality education or healthcare is astronomical. And the outcomes per dollar are really, the ROI is not there. And so especially if you're in the US or you're targeting the US, which many of our listeners should be, there is a massive problem to solve. At the same time, as you just alluded to, Amir, selling to healthcare, incumbent healthcare providers, and selling to schools sucks. They're very conservative. They're very risk averse. Baking into their workflow is a complete nightmare. And so this leads me to the advice we were giving earlier. Consider what a full stack healthcare provider looks like, or as much of the stack as you can afford to reasonably build. Imagine what a full stack disruptor school might look like. What does it mean to be a student in a post-AI global world? That's the kind of startup that is most interesting to me. I've advised a number of startups that help colleges and schools, and they're all stuck going through the administrators and the teachers. And those people, for the most part, either lack imagination or lack any time to apply their imagination. And it's probably the latter. They're all well-meaning and they're all, trying their best, but they don't have any time and any tolerance for risk. And instead, I've encouraged a number of them to just go sell directly to students and teachers who can just pick it up and use it in their classroom the same way that Asana or Canva or others have been used. And I think that's something to consider as well.
It's interesting, there's a few things here. My wife's a teacher, full disclosure. First of all, teaching or education is a highly regulated industry in most countries. You also have public education systems that can't simply be displaced by a commercial model. There's also the fact that schools are about a lot more than academic education, right? There's sort of a socialization and civics aspect and things like that. I think there are a lot of problems with schools. Not all of them can be solved with technology. I think one bit of low-hanging fruit that is mentioned that is maybe more solvable is one thing that my wife complains about more than anything else.
Besides you?
Is the admin burden, right?
We're in a majority audio format, Yaniv. You need to do you give me the finger with voice.
Fuck you, Chris. There you go. Is that better? You're welcome. That's my full accessibility friendly insult.
Your full stack.
Full stack, fuck off. Okay, where was I going? So yes, the admin burden, right? So teachers want to teach, and a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them are very good teachers, but generally with the passage of time, they have more and more shit to do that is not teaching. And often when funding gets cut to education, it's the administrative roles that go first. And I don't mean not the administrative roles in the bureaucracies that create more admin work, but the roles that actually support the doing of administration. They go away. Those support roles go away. And so teachers are stuck doing more and more of this nonsense on their own, right? Filling in reports and forms and, even simple things like preparing class materials, distributing class materials. And so I do think there is a non-trivial opportunity for startups to automate that stuff away. It's not going to be your next $1 trillion company, but I think that there's more of an opportunity and maybe a bit less resistance because it's not going to fundamentally change how education is done, but it could make it significantly more efficient and allow teachers to do what they are there to do, what they love to do, which is teach.
By the way, same exact problem for healthcare providers.
I think education and healthcare have a lot of similarities in terms of the types of systems that they are.
Yeah, that's why I connected the two in my responses. That they're both, they have an extraordinary set of similarities, and they are each, maybe education more so, the silver bullet to improving humanity. If we can up-level our kids' education, we will have more rational, more empathetic, more effective leaders, and it'll make the world a much better place.
Kumbaya.
And if they can stop being sick and stuck in hospitals and emergency clinics, the quality of life will go way, way up.
We've got two more I wanted to cover quickly. So the first is an internal agent builder, which sounds boring, but I think it's actually quite a deep insight from what I've seen, right? And this says, all companies will soon have one thing in common. Every employee will build their own agents to automate the repetitive part of their jobs. We'd like to fund founders working on the infrastructure they'll use to do that. Why do I think this is interesting, even though it sounds a bit boring? I'm seeing every company in this mad scramble to say, oh, we've got to use AI to automate our internal processes and all of that. And often, these initiatives are led by non-technical functions, by operations. I've heard them often being led by HR even. And what you end up with is systems that, frankly, as an engineer, I find scary, right? Like there is a big difference between saying, hey, let's sort of play with some AI agents and let us use AI agents to automate core parts of how we run our business, even if it is internal, and, potentially reduce our staffing needs. That's a production system, right? And I think people don't realize that. And so I see a lot of icebergs that are going to be hit soon because, yes, tools exist that allow you to create internal agents, but they're not safe. They don't have all of the guardrails and all of the safety nets that allow non-technical employees to automate their work. And so I think whoever cracks that is going to be addressing a huge market.
That's part of the interesting part. I think if you create a synthetic human, Ryan Hoover wrote an article that I really like about like synthetic humans. And if you create a synthetic human and create the guardrails there and create the safety there, then you actually have a very, very valuable product. I think the problem from an engineering perspective and from a product perspective is extremely complex. If you go into any enterprise, you have end systems that you need to access. So, and MCP is just like the tip of the iceberg for how do you access systems. You need to have write access, and you need to have read access, and you need to have permissions, and you need to have authorization, authentication. You need to have workflows. You need to deeply understand interpersonal connections and where the knowledge is based in the company and who to ask. So I think there's tons of complexity in building internal workflows and connecting to internal systems. But if you nail that, and it's very hard to nail, but if you nail that, you have a very valuable system. It's comparable to MuleSoft, Salesforce MuleSoft, that did that for big enterprises. I think there's a place where you can have meaningful core workflows run by AI.
If you're talking about hardcore industrial strength rails that your massive insurance company is running on, or your healthcare company, then you need hardcore enterprise grade agent infrastructure, tooling, developer interfaces, blogging, and all this sort of stuff. But I think if you're talking about agents that are spun up on the fly to do work for you, the dream I have, and my intuition is that these are going to ultimately be no harder to spin up than a Google Doc or a Google Sheet or a Google Slide. There's going to be Google Agent Studio or Office 365 Agent Studio, Copilot Studio. You're going to click new, and you're going to give it a task, and you're going to say go. And it's going to say, what tools should I use? Or, hey, who's the product manager of that? And what permissions and guardrails should I stick to? And people are going to be spinning up, quote unquote, agents with the same level of forethought and complexity as they do to spin up a document. Now, this may take days, weeks, months, or years to get to that reality, but I think that's where it's ultimately heading. And I think it ultimately, again, gets baked into some of these core productivity tools.
Quite possibly right. But I think, well, maybe it's baked into the core productivity tools. I think what you're describing is very difficult. And that is why this request for startups resonates with me. I think it can be easy to think that we're there now, but anybody who has come into a growing business that's got a whole bunch of shit in Zapier knows that there's a difference between having a bunch of chewing gum and duct tape and having internal agentic systems that are reliable and scalable. And so I think that's really what we're talking about here. Final one, just a quick one, because I like the aspiration behind this. And this is AI research labs. What this one says is, OpenAI began life as YC Research, our in-house research lab. I didn't realize that either. OpenAI pioneered the concept of independent AI research labs. OpenAI is doing incredible work, but there are many unsolved problems in AI and still plenty of opportunity for new research labs. So what they're saying here is the foundational space is not tapped out, that, if OpenAI is likely to be the next $1 trillion company, there is more yet to be done at that foundation level, and that they would like to fund ambitious technical startups to do that. Do we agree or not?
I think it's a no-brainer. I think having research in places, I think GPT is a great advancement towards GAI, but it's not general intelligence. And there's multiple places where we still have big gaps in knowledge that require deep research. Things like robotics, things like what is the next level of intelligence that is not based on transformers. There's tons of places in this industry that are still like totally unknown. How do you get consistency in AI in like a predictable way? There's tons of problems that if you do deep research in them, you will uncover extreme value, and that's a good investment to make.
Yeah, I think this is obviously true, and it's obviously a good thing to put a call out for. I just want to put a point of caution out there for founders, because I've bumped into a number of founders recently in my advisory work where they're positioning themselves as doing deep research, but wanting to stay arm's length from commercialization. They're like, we just want to be a research lab, and we have a 2, 3, 5, 10-year time horizon. And we're raising millions of dollars to kind of get halfway through step one. And we don't want to touch the productization of this thing. And my advice has been to caution that, we talk about full stack disruption, right? One of my religions is full stack disruption. If you build something truly novel that breaks some aspect of the world, chances are you need to take it to market. And so OpenAI is not a pure research lab. It's a deep tech product company. So I just want to caution some people's desire, people who tend to come from academia or come from deep domain expertise, to want to live in a research lab, but don't want to touch the commercialization. I don't know that there's a lot of appetite for that. And don't confuse this call for startups to be that. That's not my perception. It's more like OpenAI.
Let me take the other side of that, because I think OpenAI is a unique organization from a unique point in time. And for a long time, they were a research lab. That's why they started out as a not-for-profit. And they kind of, through some combination of luck and good timing, stumbled into this incredible product opportunity. I don't particularly believe that lightning is going to strike twice in that way. And what I'm actually thinking about as we talk about this is, I've got a friend who's a biotech founder, right, in early drug discovery. And the way the biotech, this is also a VC-funded space, right? But the way biotech works is that the startups will never have the resources to take a new drug to market because of clinical trials and all of that stuff. And so the model is you basically, you have a number of barriers of de-risking, same as in tech, right? Where you de-risking some of the key parts of that drug discovery. And you might get halfway, to your point, Amir, to taking this thing to market. And at that point, you get yourself acquired by big pharma. So the life cycle there, the exit there is always, nearly always, acquisition by big pharma. And I wonder if actually that is what we're going to be looking at, where these AI research labs are going to do fundamental research on pushing the frontier of technology. And, they're going to have trade secrets. They're probably going to be patenting things, which I know, Chris, we normally advise startups not to do. And then when they've got some technology that is at a sufficiently advanced proof of concept, they'll get themselves bought by OpenAI or by Google or whatever for, a few $100 million, even a few billion if they're lucky. And that will be the life cycle.
Yeah, I think aiming for acquisition is one thing. Aiming to be sort of a pure play research lab for the rest of time feels like a bit of a difficult thing to pull off. Not impossible. There are, people have pulled it off. It's just truly novel things require novel go-to-market and novel business models, and require you to typically pursue that to the logical conclusion.
Okay, well, I think it's a really interesting one. These YC requests for startups, sometimes, like you say, they're a little bit shiny object syndrome, but they definitely point to the direction things are going in. A lot of really smart YC partners reading the tea leaves and seeing what they are seeing in tech from a front row seat. So really fun to discuss. Thanks, guys. Amir, if people want to follow you or find you on the internet, or maybe even pitch their startup to you, where can they find you?
I'm the only Amir Shevat on LinkedIn, and I'm Amir.blue on Blue Sky.
And Chris, how about you?
You can find me on all the social media at Chris Saad, or over at my site, chrissaad.com, and my newsletter, chrissaad.com/newsletter. How about you, Yaniv?
I'm on LinkedIn, trying to make it a less boring place. I love receiving connection requests from TSP listeners, so hit me up, let me know you're a listener, and I will accept your request. All right, Amir, thanks for joining us. Love having you on as a regular guest. And Chris, it's been fun as always. Have a great day, guys.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Today's episode of the Startup Podcast was brought to you by Vanta. Vanta automates compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, and more, saving you time and money. while helping you build customer trust. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center, all powered by Vanta AI. Over 7,000 global companies already use Vanta. Why don't you? Get $1,000 off Vanta when you go to vanta.com/TSP. That's VANTA.com/TSP for the Startup Podcast to get $1,000 off.